Welcome to the Elixir. I am so grateful and honored and excited to be chatting with you. The gratitude is endless. I'm so happy that you're here. Introducing Françoise Mathieu, Executive Director of Tend and a friend of mine. Françoise, why don't you tell us about you and Tend and introduce yourselves to our people?
Sure. All right. So I'm French Canadian, which is not necessarily a huge part, but it explains my name and my accent. I'm originally from Northern Quebec. My parents were teachers in the high Arctic, and I moved to Ontario about 26 years ago. So that's a little bit about me as a human. I have a background in crisis and trauma work. So I'm a mental health professional by training. And a long time ago, I became really interested in burnout and what we really think of as provider resilience. So I became interested in how can service providers, which includes, from law enforcement to healthcare to social services to everyone in between, how can we stay well in order to continue serving the people who need us? And so I created a company, and it's had various iterations, but Tend is almost 20 years old now.
Wow, 20 years old. I didn't realize it was so mature. I will say to everyone listening that if you ever have a chance to go to a Tend conference and listen to Françoise speak, it's, the mind-blowing. I guess you could say that literally and figuratively. It was such a beautiful experience, such a unique perspective that I don't think many people understand. And I think, if we're looking at the Elixir being a way to cure common ideas about self-care, I think it's important to look at why do we need self-care and what's happening, especially coming off the last 2.5 years.
Yes, I could not say that better. And, it started as a small company. It was just me and a friend. You know how it is. Small companies we had a big idea, big hearts, and just two of us. And it just grew. But you're so right. The pandemic, my goodness, the pandemic has amplified. There was nothing new to us. And that's what's so interesting for me. One of my lessons learned is that the pandemic showed the cracks in the foundations. It showed the dirt. When you walk into your house, it's a beautiful Saturday morning and you're like, my kitchen's gorgeous. And then you're like, oh my goodness, look at all those. So I like to say, my company, we were ready for the pandemic, not that we knew it was coming, but in terms of our tools, it has only validated what we've been saying for a really long time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think even just speaking from personal experience and having to go into the hospital, for example, during the pandemic, not COVID related, but for other reasons, health reasons. And it was as though all of the empathy left the building. It was just people were done and they didn't even see you and they didn't acknowledge you. And on the reverse end, I felt for everybody, even though I was in so much discomfort myself. So what is the work that you're doing to help people recover from, I suppose it's burnout? Compassion fatigue is now empathic strain?
Empathic strain. Yeah, so we've got burnout.
Yeah.
We've got empathic strain, which is the new preferred term for compassion fatigue. And then we have secondary trauma, which is when you're doing high trauma work, how that can hitch a ride with you and really alter your sense of safety or of the world. If you worked in child welfare, the way you look at kiddos isn't the same as if you have never been exposed to that work.
Right.
What we're seeing as a result of the pandemic, I'm smiling because we're recording this during nursing week, and I can't think of a better time. And I actually am doing a keynote with nurses this afternoon to look at the complex overlay of so many things. You said yourself, people are exhausted. A lot of people, no matter what kind of work you do or whatever field you're in, so many of us have been trying to keep it all together, keep our families safe, look after their emotional well-being, keep our businesses alive. My brother works in the entertainment industry. His industry vanished. Mine quadrupled in volume, right? No one was unaffected, mm-hmm. right? The reason I'm smiling is that I have really enjoyed the real connection, even through Zoom, that I've been able to have with professionals in the last 2 years. And can I give you a couple of examples?
I would, yes.
Okay. We've done a lot of work with leadership, a lot. And I mean, obviously only good leaders would come to us because they care, right? And the rawness, the authenticity, the vulnerability of opening a Zoom meeting to do a prep meeting, with the leader, the CEO of a healthcare center, let's say, and to have them just have tears in their eyes and say, I am exhausted. I'm worried about my team. Like just people being real. So I really appreciate that, just authenticity. The other thing that really stood out for anyone listening who has children of your own, whoever those may be, those of you who are the emotional regulators of your families, we also saw a lot of people trying to be all things to all people, right?
Yes.
Homeschooling, my goodness, all of that. And some time ago, I just needed half an hour of quiet away from my beloved family. And I got a coffee and I went to, I live in Kingston, so beautiful shores of Lake Ontario. And I went to get a coffee. This is a true story. It's going to sound like I made it up. And so I'm just parked in my car, just staring off, drinking my coffee. And I look at this line of basically crying women in their cars.
There's not enough chai lattes in the world for that.
Yeah. Like 7 a.m. on a Saturday, and everyone's just like, and I'm only slightly exaggerating, but it also made me think about the shared humanity. Like, it didn't matter if that was a CEO or a daycare worker. Like, it didn't matter who you were. It just, sort of leveled that playing field. But of course it didn't, because some of us have way more means and privilege and access to things than other people. So it's not like we were all in this together. We weren't even all in the same boat. We're not even in the same sea. But it brought that extra layer. Now, what we need to add is my company was busy long before the pandemic happened. Burnout was already a factor, right? I think it's also a myth making to think that somehow in March 2020, everything fell apart and that we were all great February 2020. Like, that's not true either.
No, it was already broken, I think, in many ways, especially the healthcare system. Yeah. Yeah.
But I also, I got concerned. So I'm a student of history. My first degree was in history, and I'm really interested in lessons learned from the past. And it was really clear to me from the beginning that this was not, do you remember 2 weeks to flatten the curve?
Right? It's like almost like it's like a punchline now. That's the funniest thing I've ever heard.
It's at the same time as Tiger King, if anyone remembers that.
Oh no.
I know. Very retro.
That's a whole trauma talk in and of itself.
Right? Seriously. But the thing that was interesting to me at the time, and I actually remember talking to my team about this, I was like, okay, so this is not a 2 week or even a 2 month kind of situation. And the people that were not going to cope as well, and I turned out to be right because I was kind of predicting this. That's what I do for a living. It's not like I'm a genius. It's just I watch and I observe. Were people who were saying to me, oh, when everything goes back to normal. And I was thinking to myself, hang on a second. We are going through a mass global event, the scale of which and the impact of which we have not seen since the Second World War. Like, do I want to live through a historical event? I do not. Did I have grief around it at the start? Yes, I did. But when you recognize that you're going through something that has ramifications, for years to come, living as if things are going to, quote unquote, go back to normal, I think actually reduces our bandwidth we get whiplash because it's going to be like, oh, remember when Omicron hit and people were like so deflated? It's discouraging. I think we need a different framework. And that's what I'm doing with all the organizations I'm working with right now, is saying, yeah, this is not back to normal. It's some new normal, some new uncertain path ahead.
Yeah. And I mean, to extend on that comment, face masks and lip gloss and a great facial, it's not going to cut it. So, we use the word self-care in our practice all the time, but we know that self-care is so much more than, it's important to do those things and to take care of yourself. But I think, coming off the tails of what we just did and went through and historically, as you say, what we've been through, what do you think is working and what's not working? Mm-hmm. Although I love a good face mask, I'm not going to lie.
Oh, so do I. My goodness. So part of how I went through the last 2 years and was actually watching your Instagram and texting our mutual friend Lisa saying, when, how soon? Like it was like
the door is open for you.
And also, of course, being on Zoom all day, it kind of was like, as a, a woman of a certain age, I became more and more aware of, like I had never stared at myself for this long. So here's the thing. I recently did an interview where I was misquoted to say that I don't believe in self-care. That is not true. I believe in self-care. I get lots of sleep. I exercise because it helps reduce my anxiety. I believe in all of those things 100%. What I became concerned with is a lot of places were throwing it at people as if it was going to be the magic bullet. We call it spray and pray, kind of like take care of yourself, but we're not going to change anything about your working conditions or what have you. And it became a little bit of toxic positivity that somehow, if I have a bubble bath, everything's going to be okay. And of course, that isn't true. So let me say it here for the record. I 100% believe in self-care. I think it's really essential and important. What does make the biggest difference, though, is what we do moment by moment, as opposed to, we've all had a situation where pre-pandemic, we went away on vacation and got sick right away.
Yeah.
Right? Right?
Every time. Every time.
And so what I often say is the least interesting thing to me is what people do Friday night on their weekends or whatever. Fine, good for you. Like you want to meditate, you want to go to a spa, you want to do that, good for you. You want to drink a whole bottle of wine. I have issues with that, but like you want to watch 7 seasons of whatever. That's not actually the most interesting part. What's really helpful is recalibration of your nervous system on a moment by moment basis. And what I'm saying here is not adding one more thing to people's list. I'm not saying to everybody, everyone needs to meditate for 40. No, that's not what I'm talking about. We're really interested in what we call micro strategies. And just to give you evidence, we're working with some of the 911 communicators, so emergency communicators. They are extremely busy. I think everyone would agree with that. Our micro strategies, they say, are working for them. So I'm talking about 1 to 2 minute strategies. And I'll give you an example if you don't mind.
I would love.
Okay. So one of the things we know from neuroscience is a habit. If you do it like 21 days in a row, it becomes ingrained, right? Your brain creates this new pathway of like, oh, Françoise is washing her hands without thinking about the past or the future. When we wash our hands, we're going to have a little mindful moment. So these are small rituals you can build in. So I try and implement all of these. One of them is washing my hands. So I could be washing my hands while thinking about, did I take the chicken out of the freezer for tonight? Or I'm so annoyed at so-and-so from yesterday. Or I could just say, hey, here's hot water. I'm going to feel the hot water and the soap on my hands. I'm going to have a moment. It could also be if you work outside the home, the transition rituals, right? So whether it's firing up your laptop or the commute, you can have a moment before you go in. And the same at the end of the day. I saw so many people who I'm staring off at my computer here who work from home, 8 hours of that, and then continue working on the corner of the kitchen table, watch Netflix while you're answering work emails. There's so many little things we can build in. Like when I'm done today, I'm going to take this off because that's my work jacket. And I'm going to, even if I don't have a private office, I'm going to let my brain know that I'm switching from on duty to off duty. So they're all small things like that. They actually really make a difference.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I mean, the work from home piece, I felt completely stifled. Like I was dead stopped in my tracks. If I'm not creating and doing something new and exciting and talking to people and learning, I literally feel like I'm going to die. So the pandemic for me was like, the work from home piece, I couldn't. I still had to walk in. Fortunately, I had a space to go to, but it was just me walking into the spa with no one there for 8 months and just trying to do something and be somewhere. So that transition piece, for people who are working at home, I can imagine being really hard, like walking out of the door and trying to shift.
And the constant interruption. So I was talking to friends of mine who are caregiving for, kids of every age and circumstance. And it's, we call it switch tasking. So it's like, I'm going to try and do some creative thing. And then I get pinged and then I get notified and I get So for example, someone said to me the other day, what's your plan for the keynote? I'm doing another keynote for Nursing Week on Wednesday. And I said, well, I don't know yet. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, I need 2 hours without the world asking for things so I can think, right? I need to go for a walk. I need quiet. And I think that's also what's really exhausting. A lot of people talked about constant interruption, or we call it hyperconnectivity.
Mm-hmm.
We can't, it's very depleting to be hyper connected to everything. Now I did a bunch of other things. You know, I'm a work in progress, but do you want to hear how I became addicted to TikTok and then got over it?
Oh my God. This is okay. Yes, I do. I'm not going to follow along. So I want to hear your experience.
TikTok is so fun, and is the perfect addictive algorithm. It was designed in the perfect, the 30-second and the 3-minute bites. And the fact that there's yet another feed, like the fact that it never ends, it's the perfect addictive device. It's incredible. It's brilliant. It's quite genius. And at first I was like, I need something fun. And I'm sure people listening who are younger are like, you have no business on TikTok, which is true too. And it just was like a good distraction. And then so quickly, like my wrist is hurting because I've been holding my phone for 2 hours. I'm like, just one more, And I did it because it was a nice break from Twitter or doom scrolling, right? Mm-hmm. But at some point I realized it was not restful. It wasn't restorative. So I got off the TikTok. I got off Twitter. And I'm not saying, folks, if social media works for you, completely fine, right? This is a very individual practice. I'm still on Instagram. Somehow that works for me. I got off Twitter because it was just people yelling at each other constantly. And when I was done needing it for whatever I needed it, I just thought, can I take a month off? And at first I had like phantom Twitter loss. I was like, what's going on in the world? Do I need to check? And finally I was like, what am I doing to my nervous system? I'm not a journalist. I'm not a decision maker, so it's kind of like that self-awareness of like pausing and being like, why am I doing this? And can I try not for a week and see?
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds to me, like what I'm hearing you saying is all really doable, achievable, actionable, bite-size, baby steps.
Yes.
To being more present. And ultimately that's the root of it, I would say.
100%.
But how, okay. So maybe we can shift a little bit and talk about burnout because I would argue that if you're feeling burnt out or you are experiencing burnout, you likely don't have the ability to even be aware of needing to take the step, correct? So how do we
Absolutely.
Acknowledge and shift and move through?
The Canadian Mental Health Commission has a beautiful continuum. We call it the mental health continuum, from green to yellow to orange to red. I think we all know what red looks like. Red is full burnout. People may be experiencing depression, hopelessness, a form of collapse, some physical and emotional symptoms. I think we all know, or if we don't know we're in burnout, people around us, they see it. Like you can't hide it for that long. What I like to think about is the yellow or the orange. And the yellow I like because someone said to me, the yellow is something isn't right? Starting to notice in ourselves and if anyone listening has experienced depression before, you know what I'm talking about, where you have warning signs that we often ignore, but they're there. There's little breadcrumbs. And you're absolutely right that once people get to the full burnout phase, a bath ain't going to cut it. 2 weeks off might not even cut it, because if we're talking about work-related burnout, let's pretend you work we're going to take a different profession for a minute. So my daughter's a law student who's today just started her summer placement on Bay Street. So I just got some gorgeous photos of her in her stunning outfit. Like, bless her heart. It's so exciting.
That's congratulations, Mama.
Incredible.
That's
so
awesome.
Proud of her. And we know that burnout, for example, in the legal profession is very common and people burn out. So what happens though is, let's pretend you're a busy lawyer and you've really hit the wall and you go on leave. Let's say you take 2 weeks off. Well, what's going to change when you come back? right? So if you just took 2 weeks off, sometimes your nervous system is so depleted. So I'll hear people say, I just watched 7 hours of TV every day. Like I didn't restore. I was so drained, or I just slept, but I don't feel refreshed. If nothing has changed to your life and your work conditions 2 weeks later, so lawyer exhibiting a burnout does not access any type of workplace accommodation, doesn't seek any counseling. And I'm not saying that as a judgment, but we know that sometimes just taking time off isn't quite enough. It might be that you need to really seriously reconsider your workload, even maybe where you work, your workplace climate. Like there's a lot when you burn out.
Yeah, interesting. I wonder how, to go back a little bit, like how leaders can even be more aware of this and how they can be better. And looking at, my team is chocked full of empaths. Naturally, I would hire empaths because I am empathetic. But we're constantly taking care of people. That's what we do best. We take care of people. We make them feel good. We listen. We're supporting. We're hearing vulnerabilities, we're hearing insecurities all day long. So that shift for them, I hear it. They go home and there's no conversation left. And, they're talking all day. So I wonder how, leaders can do better in this space as well.
Yes. Well, first of all, I love what you're saying. I have a friend who's a massage therapist, and I think people who are not in that field don't realize what an intimate job it is to provide personal care of any kind to an individual, which, you know better than anyone. It's a very intimate confessional, like people will talk about.
And sometimes we're like the only people that have touched them in months, like we're the only form of physical touch for people. Yes. So yeah, it is.
And before I answer your question about leadership, I really relate to that notion of going home and thinking, oh my goodness, like, you want advice, or you want, I have a friend who's a physiotherapist, and he's like, I'm not doing physio after work. Like, that's my job. Right. So I work, as I said before, I work with amazing leaders. It doesn't mean they're perfect, and it doesn't mean they don't make mistakes. The Harvard Business Review, which is, basically out of Harvard Business School, produced some of the best writings on what is called compassionate leadership during the pandemic. I was blown away by the quality of what they talked about. And some of the takeaways: what is compassionate leadership? Compassionate leadership is not permissive. Compassionate leadership might mean firing someone. It doesn't mean like, oh, anything goes and I'm going to accommodate everybody, because first of all, you can't. And if you're trying to accommodate one group, there's going to be a perception of unfairness with another group, right? That's like, compassionate leadership, though, is being authentic, not pretending that you've got it all figured out all the time. I think sometimes as leaders, we try to say, we got this team, but in the back end, we're, panicking. Being real, like, this was hard for everyone. And the leaders that we found had the best success were authentic. They were like, you know what, this is hard. Or what I communicated to you yesterday, actually change of plan, just being honest about that. But again, not engaging in toxic positivity. And toxic positivity is, we got this, silver linings of the pandemic, go team, I believe in you. When people are like, no, we're not okay. Like, we are really having a hard week. Just being able to acknowledge that goes a really long way. Oh, and not micromanaging.
Yeah.
I have so many things to say about that.
Amazing. Well, I think, this conversation is so important, because I think it's one thing to expose new ideas and innovative ways of thinking about self-care. But if we don't understand the root cause and what's actually happening, what are we doing? Right? So, I would love to share with everybody how they can learn more from you and how they can be a part of Tend. And, personally and professionally, I think it's valuable, whether you own a company or you're just someone who cares about yourself and humanity, period. They should experience Tend in some capacity. So.
Sure. So you can go to our website, which is just tendacademy.ca or .com. We have tons of free resources. There's several podcasts that I've already done that are available. We have downloadable MicroStrategy handouts. There's so much there, and it's all free. So I think that's the best way to get to learn a little bit about us.
Amazing. Great. Okay. Well, we'll definitely link everything up for everybody listening. And then in return, I would love for you to come in and actually bring our mutual friendly so that we can do some self-care.
I'm on my way. Can I come today? I'm on my way.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Françoise. I appreciate your time so very much. I hope that you find some time to self-care today, and we will be in touch soon.
Thank you so much.